Welcome back, fellow veterans. This is Justin from BeyondTheUniform.io, where my goal is to give military veterans the tools they need to be successful in their civilian career. My guest today is Tony Zamora.
Something that was surprising, I guess, was that not everything is really laid out for you, right? Like in the military, a lot of things are laid out for you. You go through like specific training checklists. You have like a criteria on how you're going to grow your career, and you know, you take the test, advance, and everything's defined by points and very structured in the military. When you get out, it's nothing like that, right? Like you're as successful on the outside as you want to be. Like you have to be hungry for those opportunities and constantly seek those, like growth opportunities, training opportunities, because nothing's really like laid out for you. So that was kind of like a little bit surprising.
Tony was an electronics technician, and in this interview, he talks about his current role and the past several years in human resources, what that's like, what does human resources do, what's the day-to-day look like, how he got into it, and his advice for veterans based on being on the other side of the hiring process. So here's my interview with Tony. All right, well, today I'm speaking with Tony Zamora, and Tony, appreciate your meeting with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So for listeners, I wanted to give a very abbreviated background for Tony, and I know we'll dive into the specifics, but Tony served as an electronics tech in the U.S. Navy, and then as an electronics repair technician in the Coast Guard. He now works as the Director of Human Resources at Ipsos, which is one of the world's leading and most trusted market research firms with over 5,000 employees worldwide. And Tony's worked at a bunch of different places in HR roles or human resource roles at Sierra Nevada Corporation and the San Jose Group and a couple other places that we'll get into as well. So Tony, I guess first off, any corrections to that background information?
No, good background information. So Ipsos actually has over 17,000 employees.
Oh, 17. Okay, nice.
Yeah, so we're a huge company, the third largest in the world, one of the most innovative and leading market research companies out there. So yeah, it's pretty interesting being here. Awesome. Yeah, I think that's the only change I had for you.
Cool. Well, to start off, I'd love to learn about at what point you knew you were going to leave the military and how you approached that decision.
You know, I never thought I was going to leave the military. I thought when I joined, you know, when I was 18, I joined, and I knew I wanted to join ever since I think I was like 15. I think I was a freshman or sophomore in high school, and I knew I wanted to join, and I thought I was going to make a career out of the military. But it was just about, I think I was just about to hit my 4-year mark, and I was going through a whole bunch of, like if I wanted to go into like special ops or seaman admiral and become an officer. So I had all these different options, but I ended up hurting my back at the time, and so life just kind of flipped itself and it came to a halt, right? Like, so I no longer had options in the military. I needed to figure out what I was going to do after that, just after, I think it just served just over 4 years, so like 4 years, 4 months. So I ended up getting medically discharged from the military. So that's kind of how I ended up finding out I was going to leave the Navy.
And, you know, I'm curious because I don't think your story is that uncommon where the decision to leave is not premeditated and it's somewhat sudden. I'm just imagining facing that challenge. You're then kind of dropped into this changing gears of now having to figure out what you're going to do. And I'm wondering, like, what was that like? Like, how did you start to investigate what you did want to do?
Good question. So, like, you know, I talked to, you know, the former chiefs that I had, some mentors that I had, and just as I'm kind of transitioning, it was like, what do I do? And let me talk to, you know, some more experienced people or some senior people, just because, again, I was an electronics tech, and that's all I knew was electronics. I was going to school for electronics engineering. Like, that's what I always wanted to do, was just fix things, right? But some people pointed out to me at the time and said, hey, you're good at fixing things, but you're also good at fixing people, right? So like at the time in the military, I was like the PRT coordinator, or physical readiness training like coordinator. So I would help people get it into shape and meet standards, right? I was also helping people like navigate their way through like the GI Bill and the administrative side of that. So I was always like looking into Navy policies and benefits and just how to get the most out of my time in the Navy, and I was helping others with that. And so some senior folks said, hey, you know, there's a career that you could do that, and it's called human resources, right? When you get out of it, you could help people, and you could use your fixing skills to the people arena, and just help companies grow through people. And so I started looking into that. I knew in the military we had like the personnel department, and they process like your pay and that, right? But I didn't know like it was an actual career field and something much larger than that. And so I started doing a little bit of research into it. I saw that the school I was going into, I was going to DeVry at the time for management, but I saw that they had a human resources specialty as well. So I kind of shifted focus away from like the more electronics and technical management aspect into human resources. So I started studying that a little bit.
And so let's say someone's on active duty right now, they've never heard of human resources. How would you explain, you started to touch on this, but how would you explain kind of the breadth of what human resources is and maybe what was appealing about it for you?
Traditionally what human resources is like a lot of people, when they think about it, it's like a back office function. They process payroll, benefits, paperwork. They hire and fire people, basically, right? But the new way of human resources, and I would say I've probably seen this shift more so in the last 5 or 6 years, is it's really becoming more of a strategic partner to businesses. So like you're basically the CEO right-hand person. When you think about it, most businesses nowadays, we don't really do production. We don't manufacture a lot of things. It's just people, right? So like at Ipsos, again, we have 17,000 people in the world, and we have everybody sitting in an office in a cubicle. And so how do we manage those people, and how do we get the most out of those people? So you become an expert on human behavior, on employee behavior, and you're the right-hand person to the CEO or to the operations directors on human efficiency, basically.
And in your role as a director of human resources at Ipsos, what's your day-to-day life like? If you were painting the picture for someone on active duty in terms of what you do and what that day-to-day looks like, how would you explain that?
Yeah, so it's one of the things I love about human resources is that my day-to-day is completely different every day, and it changes throughout the day. So I'm not coming in, sitting at a desk and doing one thing all day long. Like I could have 10 different meetings throughout the day, and each one is going to have a different topic from if we're going to be recruiting somebody, if we're transferring departments, if we're dealing with like a merger and acquisition of another company, dealing with branding and marketing and updating our website and our employer brand. So who are we and what kind of talent are we trying to attract? So again, it's a full gamut of things. There really isn't one thing, which again is something that I like. It just keeps it interesting.
What about I know people in the military generally, they like working with teams, they like working in close-knit groups. What's that like? Like, how much of your job is things that you're doing on your own? And when you are interacting with teams, what does that team look like? Like, how many people, who are you working with?
It depends on what level of HR you're in, right? So like at the junior level, you're mainly dealing with specifically with a team of other HR people, just to kind of help grow the organization and do like the basic functions of HR. Because obviously I talk a lot about strategy and growth of in my role, but we still have to handle the basics that I mentioned earlier, like payroll, benefits, and administrative tasks. So when you're a junior HR person, that's kind of what you're dealing with, and you're kind of part of that team. At a senior level, like where I'm at, is you're more involved with like the board of directors in an organization. So there's usually anywhere between 6 to 12 people, depending on like the business and just the way the organization is structured, and you really interact with like a high level, kind of group.
And you've also worked in a variety of roles in human resources. In general, what would you say the balance is in terms of hours worked per week? Do you end up having to work on weekends? Do you have to travel? Just more of the lifestyle aspects of this sort of role.
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends, right? So again, one of the things I love about HR is that you could basically go into any company, because every company out there has HR, unless they only have like 2 or 3 employees, right? But like basically any company with greater than 50 employees has an HR department. So really you could transfer into any industry, any type of work. So I've kind of been through it all. I've been through advertising agencies, staffing agencies where they do all placement services and staff people for other companies. Like we were staffing for like Home Depot and Office Depot and all these different Fortune 500 companies we were staffing for. Now I'm in market research. So really you get a wide variety of sectors, which I kind of like. But what the day-to-day looks like, again, it depends on what kind of work or what kind of company that you're working for. So like here, market research, it's pretty traditional 9 to 5, some weekend work depending on the projects and things involved, but it's typically Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 type work. One of my previous jobs at Sierra Nevada Corporation that you mentioned, it was a defense contractor. So they did a lot of electronics engineering primarily for the Air Force, and that company was just like working in the military. I mean, it was 24/7 on call, weekends, travel. It was just as needed. They were calling you and you were coming in, kind of thing. So it really just depends on what industry you're working for.
Mm. And when you look back on, especially the first couple of years out of the military, in what ways did you feel, because of your military service, you were ahead of your peers in human resources? And in what ways did you feel like you had to catch up and fill in some gaps?
Great question. The way I thought I was ahead of the curve was just that I could basically take anything that was thrown at me and I didn't complain about things, right? So, like, unfortunately, you see a lot of people coming up out of college, and I see this now just because I deal with a lot hiring and everything. When you have somebody straight out of college, they come in and they expect, like, a well-defined role, right? Like, they want a job description. They want to check off things off a box and say, this is what I'm doing every day and only this kind of thing. And, in the military, you're doing like a billion different things, and you have collateral duties and you have everything else thrown at you. So really, I think when I was ahead of it is like, I really had nothing to complain about. Like, I was just happy to have a job, and it didn't matter what I was doing as long as I was getting paid for it, right? So I think I was kind of ahead of it there. What I was behind on were a few things. One is again, just HR is different outside than it is inside the military. And again, I didn't really have tons of experience in HR in the military because I was in electronics tech. But like my understanding of HR in the military was, they processed, DD-214s when people left. They managed payroll or that kind of thing. And again, when you're outside of it, you're definitely more strategic, you have to understand business, finance, operations. Like you really have to understand everything. And so that's kind of where I was behind the curve, where I think I learned a little bit about it in college because they give you all that experience. But for somebody that came up through HR, like doing HR internships and junior HR roles, that kind of thing, I was definitely behind the curve on that.
Mm. What about, I just think of in any transition, the transition from the military to civilian life, and even transitioning from one job to another, we always have some sort of expectation of what life will be like. And then it's interesting because then you get there and you see the ways in which you were off in that expectation. So I was curious, looking back when you were in the military, what misconceptions did you have about what life would be like as a civilian and what life would be like on the other side?
That's a good question, too. What misconceptions did I have? Trying to think. I don't know if I have an answer for that.
or maybe put a different way, what was something that was surprising when you transitioned to being a civilian?
Something that was surprising, I guess, was that not everything is really laid out for you, right? Like in the military, a lot of things are laid out for you. You go through like specific training checklists. You have like a criteria on how you're going to grow your career, and you take the test to advance, and everything's defined by points and very structured in the military. When you get out, it's nothing like that, right? Like you're as successful on the outside as you want to be. Like you have to be hungry for those opportunities and constantly seek those, like growth opportunities, training opportunities, because nothing's really like laid out for you. So that was kind of like a little bit surprising.
That's great. And I was also curious, because you work in human resources, you do see a lot of different people at different points in their career. And I was curious if you had any advice that you've learned from being in HR for so long that you would want to pass on to the veteran community?
Yeah, so a couple things, right? So one is just terminology, like, right, we get so used to acronyms and all these terminology all this terminology in the military that it doesn't really transpose into the civilian life. So when you're talking to somebody and throwing a whole bunch of acronyms or different terms out, like, they have no clue what you're talking about. Like, it's funny, I still joke around with my wife about that. We've been married 10 years, and she was in the Navy also. So we've both been out for over 10 years, and she still uses a lot of the terminology in the military, just talking to family, and nobody knows what she's talking about, right? So I'm like, honey, you got to, like, calm it down and speak in civilian terms when you're talking to the family, because they don't know what you're talking about. So that's kind of one of the things, is just understand, right, that you have to speak the same language. Civilians, and they really have no clue what you're talking about, so it's good just to, like, dumb things down and explain some things. So that's one thing. And then the other, like, tip that I would give for people coming out is just network, right? Like you hear it all the time is it's not about what you know, but who you know. And really what I see when it comes to recruiting and opportunities is just it really is about who you know. Like, it's about opening up doors and building contacts and networking and building relationships, just because it's going to help you, transition into the civilian life. It's going to help you find job opportunities, but really it's going to help you grow and find some mentors that would help you grow and again, learn the civilian lifestyle.
One thing that made me think of is you talked about when you first started to transition, you started talking to a lot of different chiefs and getting advice on the job search, and I'm wondering if any advice stands out to you that helped you, that you would want to pass on to help other veterans?
I think one of the big ones was what I just said. That's always stuck with me, is this networking, right? So a lot of the chiefs, they have, like, their chief group, and they always talk to chiefs, both former and retirees, or current chiefs and retirees, and so they just network. So I think that's one of the things that always stuck with me, is this, some people, it's out of my comfort zone on network, even though I talk to people all day long, like, that's my job. Just like going to, like, a networking event or a group after hours or something like that where I'm going to socialize, like, it's just out of my comfort zone, but it's something I do just because I know it's going to help me in my career, both professionally and personally. Just it helps build relationships and help get exposure to different people. So that's one of the things that always stuck with me that I heard from my chiefs.
How would you recommend someone goes about networking? I'm thinking someone in the military who's never really had to reach out to the unknown and never had to make those connections. How would you advise that they start doing that?
Good question. So there's, with LinkedIn, obviously they make it easy. Like, you could go on LinkedIn and search for different groups depending on what your interest is. I mean, there's even, like, Navy veteran groups on LinkedIn that you could go on there. And even when it comes to, like, networking, I don't mean just going and going to a happy hour after hours and talking to people in person. Networking could also be, like, digital, right? So you could be on email groups or phone groups, and again, with LinkedIn, they have different networking groups built into the platform that you could go in and search for whatever group that you want and start commenting and making digital relationships. Like, I've networked with people on LinkedIn that I've never met in person. I've just exchanged messages or phone conversations, but it helps build those relationships that way as well. So again, don't think that networking is just a thing that you need to go to a in-person kind of thing.
Yeah, and I that resonates with me. I cannot imagine going the entrepreneurial path without a lot of reaching out to people I don't know for advice and for help. And one thing I would say is that, and I've honestly written thousands of emails to people I don't know, from fundraising to sales to advice and mentorship. The one advantage, or one of many advantages, that veterans have is it is an incredible community in terms of giving back. And that's everything from Tony, who responded to my message on LinkedIn and agreed to this interview, to lots of people that I've responded to trying to give advice. And so I agree with Tony. I feel that hesitation in reaching out to someone I don't know. I think that's a universal feeling. And when you do it, especially with veterans, this is a group that for the most part wants to give back and wants to pay these favors forward. And so don't be discouraged. It is a numbers game. People are really busy, and so if you send out 10 emails, just expect that maybe only 2 people, even though people want to help, maybe only 2 people respond because it gets buried, or because they just had a kid, or because they just got married, or because they just changed jobs. Like, people have so many reasons that have nothing to do with you that might affect them responding or not responding, but just approach it as a numbers game. Don't be shy in reaching out and in following up. And I agree with Tony that networking component, it is new for people straight out of the military, but it's really vital in getting connected, finding out different jobs and availability. And I think that's a really vital skill for someone to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree with you. And even if it's, if you find a company that you're interested in, or an industry or something, just reach out, find somebody who works at that company, whether they're in HR or not. And people love to talk about the work that they do, and love to share ideas. So you could even say, let me treat you to a cup of coffee if you're local, or if not, let's spend 15 minutes over the phone. I'm kind of curious of what your company does, and just kind of learn that way. Yep.
Oh man, yeah, the coffee chat is
coffee
great.
Thing works, yeah.
And it's cost you $3, it's $3 and you're able to meet with someone, and some people are more willing to hop on a phone call. But never doubt the power of a $3 cup of coffee to get someone's attention.
Yeah, it's the best $3 investment you can make. Yep.
And another thing I was curious about is, either from yourself or from shipmates or from people in your role of HR, I'm just wondering if you've have any thoughts on common mistakes that you've seen people make in their job search.
Common mistakes that I've seen people make in their job search. What would that be? Again, a few things. Well, I see tons of resumes every day that come through, and again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, is just the terminology on the resume. So make sure you make it into civilian terms. And there's people. Is there this is actually something I agree with a lot, and I've never looked into.
Have you ever found any resources that help with that, or any practices that help in making sure that your resume makes sense to someone who's not in the military? I don't know if there's books or internet resources, or if it's just passing it around to lots of people, but any thoughts on tactical advice on how to make sure their resume is good?
That's a good point. I haven't seen tons of good resources out there. Maybe it's something that we should look into, right, in developing. But I know I forgot what it's called, but there's a program that helps when people are about to transition out of the military. I don't know if you remember what that group is.
TAPS class?
Yep.
Yeah.
So that group definitely helps out a little bit. But again, a lot of the people that run TAPS are prior military, and they're kind of stuck in that same mindset of using military terminology, at least from what I've seen. So I think one of the best things is just, again, passing around your resume to several people who are not military. It goes back to having that $3 coffee chat, right? Just reaching out to a recruiter or staffing agency or somebody and just say, hey, do you mind taking a look at my resume and help me kind of wordsmith this so it applies to the civilian sectors.
That's great. And I kind of cut you off. I think you were about to say something else in addition to the resumes.
I don't know. I lost my train of thought, I think.
Apologies on that.
No worries.
Yep. And I guess, maybe just a more general question. If someone is on active duty and they're thinking of getting out, let's say in a year or two, in addition to networking, any other thoughts on ways they could start to prepare for that transition, or maybe start to gain clarity about what sort of career might interest them?
Yeah, so again, obviously networking is number one. Number two, I think, is using LinkedIn. It's a great resource to find out information about companies. I mean, I've used it personally on my job search. Anytime I was changing jobs or anything, I would search for other companies or industries. I mean, it has a great search tool that you could use to find out specific industries or locations or whatever. So just really doing your homework on companies. I would say, I think maybe that's what I was saying earlier about about the resumes is another mistake that I've seen is people just don't do a lot of homework on the companies that they're applying for, right? Like they just kind of apply and say, well, this job description looked kind of interesting, so I want to apply. But really, like, do your homework to make sure it's something that you're going to be happy with, right? Something that makes an impact in your life, something that's going to satisfy you. So try to find a company that you're really going to be passionate about, and something and not just a company that is just, a job and a paycheck.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think that it can be daunting because, like you said earlier, you talked about how things aren't laid out in the civilian world, and in the military, it is very laid out. It is very prescriptive, and there's some comfort there. And one of the things I admire about your career path is that you were an electronics technician, you enjoyed that work, and then you found a career that didn't utilize that. You found something that interested you, that was beyond your current skill set, that you grew into, and that it sounds like you enjoy. And that's one thing I would encourage, is that, just because you're doing something right now in the military doesn't mean that you need to do that on the other side. And yes, there are ways in which that gives you an advantage and leverages your experience, but particularly for, a lot of people that don't enjoy their current job in the military, don't expect it to be different on the other side. This is your chance to explore companies and roles that might be better suited to you, that might lead to more happiness. And so I like that thought of what you said, of just really doing your homework and looking at the different jobs and positions and companies, and in that interviewing process, asking yourself, is this going to make me happy? Am I going to be happy here? And that can be tough, to walk away from a position that might be lucrative, but might not be well aligned with your personal goals.
No, absolutely. And going back to what we were saying, like, one of the hardest things about transitioning is every veteran is proud to serve their country. We don't do it for the money. We do it for country, and we do it for the pride that we have of serving. We wear the uniform, we earn medals, and we're proud of that. Well, none of that exists on the civilian side, right? I mean, sure, you might get a little bonus, and you get a pat on the back for doing a good job, but really it's just, it's a corporate beast, right? And it's a rat world. You hear that a lot. So really, you got to find, like, what you're personally passionate about, whether that's, like, entrepreneurship that you were saying earlier, or is it finding an industry that you're passionate about, a company that you're passionate about. So really, it's just finding really what you're proud to do personally and taking that into the workforce.
This is great. I guess maybe the final question I'd throw out is another catch-all. If there are, active duty personnel listening to this, or other veterans who are on the other side, anything else you'd want them to know, or advice, or lessons learned, or anything we didn't cover so far that would be important for them to hear?
No, just do some exploring, right? It's a lonely transition. It feels lonely when you transition into the civilian sector. You feel like you're the only person going through it, and there's not a lot of resources to find answers to your questions. But don't think that you're going at it alone, right? There's tons of people out there, tons of veterans out there. We've all been through this similar transition. Again, it goes back to the networking thing. Even if you're trying to find, like, veterans such as myself who are in the civilian sector, in HR, or whatever industry, just connect with people. Don't think that you're going at it alone. There's tons of people out there that would be happy to help you go through the same transition.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I relate to that too. I think that in submarines, everywhere I was stationed, I had a built-in family, I had a built-in group of friends, and I just look back, and, like, every Friday night, every weekend, I was doing things with those shipmates and their families, and that was a great security blanket. And then you go from that to oftentimes shifting geographic location and not having that really tight-knit group. And even though those fellow service members might not be around you physically, they are accessible electronically, and whether that's on LinkedIn, whether that's on different networking sites, finding that community, not being afraid to reach out to them and establish those ties, it's a very valuable resource, and it's necessary. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. There's no need to go this alone. The smart move is to borrow from the experience of others. So be proactive in reaching out and starting to establish that network that you had while you were in the military, starting to establish that on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. No, great points.
Awesome, Tony. Well, I appreciate your time on this and your advice, and
thank you.
really helpful to hear your story on this.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate being on, and again, if there's any veterans out there listening, feel free to find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to help you through this transition as well.
Awesome. And in the show notes, I'll put a link to Tony's LinkedIn profile too, so you can reach out to him there as well. Thanks so much, Tony.
Perfect. Thank you.
Surface.
All right, gang, that's all for today. A couple quick admin items at beyondtheuniform.io. You will find more resources like data, charts, graphs, and a ton of interviews in the podcast section. If you have feedback, if you have ideas on how to make the show better and how to provide more resources to veterans, please drop me a line at beyondtheuniform.io/ping. Lastly, not endorsed by Service to School at all, but it's an organization I've really come to respect based on these interviews. If you are on active duty or if you're a veteran in general and thinking about going to school, that's grad school, undergrad, med school, law school, any type of academic institution, I definitely recommend you check out Service to School. They provide free resources to veterans. They pair you with someone with a similar background who can guide you through the process of everything you need to know to get into the school that's best for you. That's interview prep, resume help, all sorts of things. So check them out at servicetoschool.org. Have a great rest of the week and looking forward to talking to you soon.